Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy has some of the coolest costumes and props that the fantasy genre has to offer. They put tremendous effort, love and care in making those costumes. And to be honest, many fantasy shows from today could probably still use it as an example.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
I'm a big fan of The Lord of the Rings, and in my opinion, one of the coolest but also most underrated costumes in the trilogy are the Fountain Guard costumes. The Fountain Guards, or Citadel Guards, are an elite unit, carefully selected, the best of the best. They are tasked with protecting the king and the White Tree of Gondor. Pretty cool, right? And in the movies, they stand. Yep, that's all they do, not even a close-up. Which is a shame, because their costumes are probably among my favorites in the whole trilogy. In this video I will be making the feathered helmets. But if you enjoy it, I might make another video on the whole costume. Now, if you think this to be an easy Greek-like helmet, you are gravely mistaken. This is the Lord of the Rings, which means details and flawless execution. And on top of that, the helmet is just a bit weird, kinda shaped like an onion. Why? So when you think about it, it's actually just a hassle to make it. So that's exactly why I'm gonna do it. So like I said, it's a weird shape, but I actually did make my own patterns. I just made a Greek type helmet, as I know how to do, and then I added a point on it using foam clay. And then I could just tape it and remove the tape and I have my patterns. I decided to use 7mm high density foam for the base. I drew on my patterns, flipped it around and drew them again. I made sure to cut the foam in one pass to make it as clean as possible. Especially with more organic shapes like this, you really want your edges to be clean and as straight as you can. And then it's time to glue all those pieces together with contact cement. And it's not gonna be great because we have 8 different pieces that all have to come together in a point. It also sucks because I didn't add registration marks, because those are for the little sissy boys. I want to suffer as much as possible. As you can see, everything is glued together and the point is a bit Good thing we have a belt sander to smoothen it all out. And now we come to the base of the helmet. Now you might think it's time to start on the details, but you're wrong. There are still many things I don't like about it, like for example the bottom, in my opinion, is too flat and not really that elegant, and they don't align perfectly, so I'm just gonna fix that with a knife and make it arch a bit. Now you might say that's a problem that could have been prevented with my pattern making. But I didn't ask, my patterns are perfect. So now that's fixed. As you can see, it's more elegant and it lines up way better. And now we come to a second problem, and maybe you know this problem, that when you make a Greek type helmet, those cheek flaps open up too much. Whoa. But you know what I mean. However, there is a way to fix that. To counter that problem, I taped together the helmet in the desired shape and then covered the inside of the helmet with one layer of white resin. It dries in just a couple of minutes and it cures in like an hour. Then I remove the tape again and bam, helmet stays in shape. To hide the seams, I added a shit ton of Quicksil to it. This has to be a round boy. I gave it around 5 layers in total. I just added it with my finger and used some water to smoothen it out. It's pretty straightforward. Next I added a dowel strip to the face part to give it that edge that the helmet has too. Alright, so I covered the inside with the resin, and as you can see, it's way more sturdy. I can just hold it right there and it stays in shape. I let it dry upside down, and because of that, you can see there is some resin in the tip. What I'm saying is I made a murder weapon because this tip is rock solid. It's not going anywhere. Now, if you say it's time to move on to the details, you're wrong. Again. Because now it's time for the most recognizable part of the helmet, which are the big ass wings on the side. I started off with the core piece that will hold the feathers. I made it out of 10mm Sintra because this has to be really sturdy. I cut this out with a bandsaw as a knife will just not work. And then I made a groove in it using a Dremel. This groove will hold the feathers later. I cut out all 15 feathers from 5mm high density foam 2 times. I also added some details by making some cuts with a knife. Then I used the Dremel on every individual piece to clean the edges. I did this till I looked like the ghost of Sparta and then moved on to attaching them. I glued all the 30 feathers on top of each other with super glue instead of contact cement because I would like to go home today, and then I attached them to the Sintra. They are supposed to go in that groove I made, so this took some convincing. Then I bolted this thing to a piece of 10mm UHD foam and glued that piece to the helmet. This deserved my undivided attention because this really has to be on the right place. I can pretty much mess this up in 5 different ways, so I carefully measured this out by eyeballing it. We have the base of the helmet, shit is sturdy, now we can start on the details. Specifically the pieces that you see on the nose and forehead. And I thought to myself, let's do something different today, let's do something daring, something out of the box, so I'm gonna make it out of foam. The piece that goes on the forehead I cut out of 2mm foam, as this is a pretty flat piece. And then I cut some 2mm details on top of that, and that's about it. For the nose piece I cut out the outline 2 times out of 5mm and 2mm UHD foam. I cut out the details from the 2mm piece and then glued that to the 5mm piece. UHD works great for tiny details as other densities tend to bend a bit when cutting out small parts, and that's just not fun. For the crown thing on top of it, I cut out the shape from 5mm UHD foam and then carefully dremeled out the shapes to perfection by eyeballing it again. It looks fine, shush. And then we end up with something like this, and I'm quite happy with it. I think I could actually start painting it if I wanted, but these were just the baby details. Now we come to the real stuff, because when we look at the reference we can see that there are some parts in there, many parts actually, that are embossed, so it's the opposite of engraved. And that's easy to do on metal, I think, I've never done it. But it's especially not easy to do on foam, and I don't have any materials here to do that. But I did buy this 3D paint, and with that we can just draw on the embossing and hope it looks nice, because I've never done this before, so this might suck actually, but we'll see. I just drew on my details first and then retraced it using the 3D paint. These details are toothpick sized, so I used a needle to fix any mistakes. This paint needs like an hour to dry, so I left it there for 3 days because I had places to be. Alright, so we are done with all the details on there, and I even already taped the wings, and that means we can start painting. But before we can paint, we have to prime, and for that I'm going to use the black Cos paint. It's actually a paint and a primer in one, which is great for this. I started priming the helmet with black Cos paint. I gave it a layer of 5 as I really wanted it to be primed well. I just dabbed it on with a sponge to give it that metallic texture. Later on I realized that it's actually just easier and faster to just add the paint with a brush and then just use a foamy roller on top of it to add the texture. Then I airbrushed the helmet with some A-stand steel paint. I put the helmet on a turntable so that I can keep the airbrush as steady as possible. And then we move on to some hand painting, because all those 3D painted details from before are supposed to be gold. Yippee! So I just used a brush for this and some gold leaf rub and buff. This is a wax paint and works really well for small touch-up like these. I also decided to do some shading and highlight with the airbrush for the first time in my life instead of using a brush. Because nothing beats messing up your work in the final moments, but it turned out pretty good. I used some gunmetal for the shading and some chrome for the highlights. I really kept it to a minimum though, because these are shiny boys. You never see them fight in the movies and it shows. Finally I added a coat of shiny Lucas spray and then moved on to the feathers. These are white, so I first removed some of my leftover markings with acetone, because if you don't you will just be able to count your feathers long after they've been painted. I applied a layer of 5 with white Cos paint and then added a layer of brownish airbrush paint. And with all that, we're just about done. And then we end up with something that looks like this. And I'm pretty happy with it, but I would not want to do it again. Because I already did. I made it 2 times. Hell yeah. Yeah, I think it fits. And I think that even the nose piece is long enough, because that's something you often see in movies nowadays. They have nose pieces that only cover their foreheads. I don't know why, but it's just how it is. It is a bit wobbly though, so I might add an inner helmet and some chin straps, but not in this video. Because next up I will probably make another video on the rest of the whole costume. Now, if you liked this video, I hope you will show that by liking the video and maybe subscribing to the channel. We do a lot of stuff here. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Skyshark and I will see you in the next one.